Hello, welcome into Take the North once again. I am Adam Studzinski, the producer of this podcast, filling in again for Mark Grody, who is still on the injury report, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But he is alive. We've both talked to him alongside Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune. So this is our listen to this episode that we've done not as frequently as we wanted, I guess, because of the schedule here. But Dan, we're ready to do it again. Grody list formation one more time.
Yeah, we like to take care of our guys. We hope we can get Mark ready for game day on Sunday. And we can revisit a lot of this week with him after they play the 49ers on Sunday. But busy week, Studs, for sure. And it's been a lot to sift through all the stuff that we've heard and thought and sounded out and talked to. And we've got some good sound here to kind of further our conversation as the week ends.
Yeah, we definitely do. And, look, I think I can speak for both of us when I say that Grody doesn't need practice to play on game day, my friend. So he'll be he'll be a game time decision, though, for real, after the game against the Niners. He's got an extra 3 hours because I didn't even realize until today, this is a 3:25 Central Time kick. So anyway, before we get into the sound that we have here, Dan, just want to update real quick from if you were listening to our previous episode, the injury report for Bears versus 49ers. We do know for sure 3 players that are going to be out for the Bears. Ryan Bates, Elijah Hicks, Roschon Johnson are all out. Those are no surprises there. Positive development, though, after Friday's practice was DJ Moore and DeAndre Swift. Both practiced in a limited fashion and are listed as questionable, which I looked at as positive. And Keenan Allen, Kevin Byard, Mercedes Lewis, who's always doesn't practice on Wednesdays, he's fine. Coleman Shelton, Darnell Wright, all those guys are good to go. So the 2 keys Sunday afternoon we're going to be watching as the injury or the inactive list comes out are going to be DeAndre Swift and DJ Moore.
I would certainly expect DJ to play on Sunday. I don't see that being an injury that will keep him out. We'll keep an eye on DeAndre Swift and how extensive his workload can be. Thomas Brown did say on Friday afternoon that he expects Travis Homer to have a role, as we talked about in our last episode. So get ready for a little bit of the Travis Homer experience. I do want to point out that Mercedes Lewis is on the injury report every week, and I've liked the way Grody has framed it. He just frames it as Mercedes Lewis parentheses 40, which I can totally relate to. You don't need an injury. You just need to be 40.
Yes. Yeah. He takes off practice every Wednesday. Every Thursday he takes off practice. So that's been a consistent thing since the start of the season. So, anyway, I think overall a positive injury report leading up to the 49ers game. And the running back room is going to be thin regardless of DeAndre Swift plays, but we'll see how things go there. So to the business of this episode, this is the best sound that we heard surrounding the Bears throughout the week. Some of it's from Haugh, some of it's from other outlets. This first one, Dan, is from Jaylon Johnson, who is a regular guest on the Spiegel and Holmes show on Monday afternoons on 670 The Score in Chicago, and it's must-listen radio every week. He will be on at 5 o'clock Central every Monday, basically without fail. He was excellent once again this past hit. And obviously the big story around him was how loud, I guess you could say, he was after the loss on Thanksgiving, and maybe not lit the fire that finally got Matt Eberflus fired. And so there was a lot of conversation about that. But one thing that they asked Jaylon about was what he wants to see changed, because Jaylon has obviously been frustrated with all the losing he's experienced. And so the way Jaylon answered that question, I think, was pretty straightforward, and we'll play it for you here. It's not long, and I think he makes his point loud and clear.
I'm not even gonna lie to you. I don't got no answers for nothing. I just want to win. I mean, I can't tell you all I want to see this. If it don't add up to winning, honestly, I don't really give a damn. I just want to win. And whoever comes in here, whoever's a coach, whoever's whatever, it better be about winning, and the results better be need to be there. So I mean, for me, that's all I care about. I don't really care about everything in between. Whatever needs to be done to win has to be done.
There you go. Jaylon Johnson just wants to win.
Those are the edgy tones of a player who's seen the Bears post a 28-51 record since he arrived here in 2020. Those are the sounds of a captain who has never experienced a winning season in the NFL. Those are the sounds of a guy who sounded off in the locker room at Ford Field last week because there had been a buildup of frustration. And I appreciated Jaylon at least contextualizing the outburst at Ford Field as something that really did encapsulate 5 years of what he's had to endure, which is failure and promises that we'll get it right, and then more failure, and then more promises that we'll get it right, and then more failure. For those of us who have lived it longer, this is my 12th season on the beat, it gets redundant. It gets frustrating to hear the same song and dance over and over again. And obviously, Matt Eberflus's tone is different than a lot of the other leaders that have come through that building. And I think guys had just reached a boiling point, and we're fed up of hearing the same old stick together, cliched messages in a monotone without any sort of angry edge to any of the failure. And Jaylon wants people to understand that the failure requires an angry edge. And so hopefully one of these seasons, guys that were in that draft class, that's Jaylon Johnson, Cole Kmet, can experience a winning season. They can experience the spoils of what Chicago is like when the Bears are in the playoffs and making a run. They haven't had that opportunity to experience that. And so I'm all for it. I'm all for his request to have the Chicago Bears win sooner rather than later.
And you know what? Actually, I want to make sure I have my history right, because did Jaylon and Cole Kmet's rookie season, was that the year they went 8-8 and snuck into the last wild card spot?
You're right.
So I always forget that those guys have played in a playoff game.
No, you're right. They have played in a playoff game in their first season, and what a weird year that was. I'm glad you did correct that, because it's the 2020 COVID year. There's no fans in the stands at Soldier Field. There's fans in some stadiums around the NFL, including I think in New Orleans.
I do remember there were fans there. Yeah.
I always get a kick out of it. Manti Te'o has been on NFL Network's Good Morning Football here in this last week. He was a Chicago Bear in 2020. Never got to meet him. Never saw him in the locker room. I think he started the playoff game against the Saints. So it's this weird season, because if you remember, obviously the Bears started that year like a house on fire, and then they went through a massive losing streak, and then they righted themselves in December, and then they had a win and get in moment against the Packers at Soldier Field in the finale, and they blew it, and then they backed into the playoffs because they got help elsewhere, and then they went into the playoffs and they got their teeth kicked in by the Saints. And so that's one of the weirder Chicago Bears seasons that was neither a success nor a failure, but kind of felt like both, but kind of felt like neither.
Yeah, and it was good enough for Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy to keep their jobs for one more season. But yeah, I just wanted to because I always forget that. Yeah, those guys have been in a playoff game, and technically, so and that was the first
note on that.
Yeah.
Do you remember the play that sort of defined that playoff game? First half, little Nagy trickery in the bag.
Yes, I do. It was a throwback pass that Mitchell Trubisky threw maybe the best ball he's ever thrown, and it went right through the hands of Javon Wims.
Yep.
Yes.
Flash right atomic bomb was the name of that play, and boy, did it ever explode.
Yes. And what was funny is the play was really well designed and executed perfectly up until the drop pass, and the Saints used it the next week, didn't they? Like the Saints used that play, yeah. And they they got it to work. So
you never know what kind of rabbit hole we're going to find when we start listening to this, and that's a good one right there.
Yeah. All right. So we'll go on to our next piece of sound here. So this next one is going to be from now Bears interim head coach Thomas Brown. This is from the press conference that he had on Monday. He spoke right after Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren did. So he had a good little introduction for himself, and then during his opening statement, he mentioned that he wanted to unify the team, which led to a follow-up question a little bit later of, has he noticed division in the locker room? And this was his answer.
Well, I think naturally what happens is when you don't have success, there's division because there's outside noise. And so I mentioned this in the team meeting room, but also in the quarterback room about the importance of controlling your thoughts and having self-talk. Because it's easy for doubt to seep in. There's tons of negativity outside of these walls, which is why I tell them all the time I don't even see or hear anything that happens on purpose. People send me stuff, and I delete it immediately because I really don't care whether it's positive or negative. It doesn't affect my job. And so being able to be focused on our task at hand, doing it together for each other is the overall goal.
Studs, Thomas Brown was offering his services as an author the other day when he was talking about his weight loss program. I may sign him up to be a part-time life coach because I appreciate listening to him on a regular basis. We're getting to know him really well over these last few weeks. And that message was another good one that I think resonates with players about trying to control their thoughts, trying to get themselves in the right mindset to finish the season strong and trying to get themselves in the right mindset to go play a productive football game in San Francisco. What really struck me, and I'm glad you noted it at the start of that clip, is that Thomas Brown came in to speak after Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren met the media for the first time to explain Matt Eberflus's firing. Matt Eberflus had a knack for making the easiest media availabilities seem incredibly awkward. Thomas Brown can take a very awkward circumstance and make everybody feel at ease and feel energized in his presence. And the contrast, it's just so stark. And I don't know how the Bears are going to perform over these last 5 games of the regular season. I don't know what Thomas Brown is going to do for work in 2025 and beyond. But I do know he's going to have opportunity. I do know he's going to have success in some role, and you understand why. And we've talked about it all week. And that's another example of a guy who knows how to message and knows how to resonate.
And yeah, I agree with you. I think that there is success in Thomas Brown's future as some sort of coach in the NFL. I mean, obviously he's already been around the NFL, but he seems like a guy that, look, if this particular spot and if next year he's not the Bears head coach, I think he's got what it takes to eventually be a head coach. I don't know if his time is now, but so many people that have come across him speak so highly of him. The most notable of which is Sean McVay. And Thomas Brown was the assistant head coach for Sean McVay for multiple seasons, I believe, for their Super Bowl season.
Including the Super Bowl season.
Yes. So he's a guy that Sean McVay has said believes will be a head coach eventually. And so I think there's a lot of good things in his future. Again, if Chicago's the right spot, I mean, I think we'll know over the next 5 games how, like, he'll show us if this is the right spot and if this is the right fit. But as for what Thomas Brown said there, first of all, yeah, I love his idea of self-talk, positive self-talk. That was a big thing that I learned about when I was marathon training. You have no idea how positive self-talk can really help you in when you're going through a lot of pain. And so that I thought that was great. And yeah, the fact that he seemingly does understand, like, the job he has in the immediacy is to bring this all together, because things have been, as we've seen, Dan, over the past week plus, things were crumbling all over the place. And we've heard, this is, we were talking about on the Bernstein Holmes show today on The Score about how the fact that there's this in-season firing, we're able to see much more clear than we would during a firing after the season is over, where all the cracks were and where all the problems were, because people are still talking. When you fire someone after the season, you hear from the GM, maybe the president, and then you don't hear from anyone until they hire the next coach. So we're hearing in real time what the problems were. And I think it's really insightful, and the obvious divisions in the locker room from all the losing are being addressed, and we'll see how it goes from here.
I can tell you that I've heard a lot since Thanksgiving, and over the next 6 or 7 weeks, you're going to start to see some of what I've heard filter into some of my writing. But man, this has been a wild time in the state of the Chicago Bears. The one thing that's not real wild is the continued evolution and rise of the quarterback. And there's been a lot of voices chiming in on young Caleb Williams this week. And I know you got a couple on that front as well. Yeah.
So we got 2 more pieces of sound here. And the next one is going to be from Aaron Rodgers, who had his weekly segment. That segment go on for like an hour on the Pat McAfee show. But it's, you never know what's going to come out of that. But in this case, they did ask him, Rodgers, a little bit about the Bears opening and maybe what they need, or Caleb Williams needs in the next coaching hire. And this was Aaron Rodgers' response.
Well, that relationship is going to be really, really important. If you think he's the face of the franchise and the future of the franchise for the next decade plus, they need somebody who can come in and work with him and connect with him on a personal level. I think every young quarterback, whether we want to admit it or not, we want to be coached really badly. We don't have all the answers. We'd love somebody to hold us accountable. My favorite coaches, the coaches you want to play for the best, were always the ones that, that held you to a crazy level. I tell a story a lot about Tom Clements and how he used to give me minus performances on 100 quarterback rating games. And I got so mad. I just wanted to kind of like show him, that I could, play that perfect game that he was holding me to the level that he was holding me. And I just loved him for that, because he made me want to play great for him, because I just wanted that smile, that rare Tom Clements smile that was like, hey, good game, plus performance. Because it was just his binary, his plus or minus performance. And it was, semi-arbitrary according to me. But he always held me to such a high standard. I think that's what a young quarterback needs, and I don't think I think you need some stability. The other thing I'm going to say is really, really important. Diva, and I'm glad you set me up for this question. I think there has to be a movement, and I thought there would be, before I go on that tangent, I thought there would be when the ownership came out and said it's unacceptable that there's, however $100 million being paid out to coaches that aren't coaching anymore. Right, or personnel people.
800, I think it was 800 million.
Yep.
700 or 800 million. Yeah.
So what I'm saying, I think, is there needs to be a return to hiring the right person at general manager, at head coach, and then allowing them to do their job with full backing from the organization.
All right, Dan. So a lot in there. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, well, look, you're right. There's a lot to unpack. Don't forget that Aaron Rodgers was once a quote-unquote guest on the Take the North podcast from his darkness retreat.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Beautiful episode.
Yes.
People can go hunt that down. But I think there's a lot there. The latter point there about allowing your head coach and your general manager to do their jobs with full backing, I think that's what the Bears are trying to do with Ryan Poles. They could no longer try to do that with Matt Eberflus, and so they've had to press that lever and let him go. As it relates to the quarterback needs in this league, particularly for a young quarterback, I think Rodgers, say what you want about him, he's a quirky, peculiar guy. He's got great insight on the position and what's required to succeed at it. He's won 4 MVP awards. He knows what it takes to excel. And so when he talks about standards and stability, and he talks about coaches that can push the right buttons with a quarterback, I think that's something that the Bears cannot overlook as they go on this search for a leader of men and a new coach to lead the Chicago Bears. I've had conversations over the last week, Studs, with people that say they need to be seeking, whether it's the head coach or somebody that works very closely with the head coach, someone that can not only connect with quarterbacks, that connect with this quarterback. You have to know the specific wiring of the guy that you use the number 1 pick in, and find a guy who pushes his buttons right. You hear the story in there from Aaron about Tom Clements, understanding what was going to motivate him and understanding what was going to piss him off competitively, what was going to raise him up when he needed to be raised up. The Bears have to find that match for Caleb, and it's not going to be the same guy for every quarterback. So it's a very tricky puzzle to solve. But now it's up to Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles to do their homework and find their path to that answer.
And as Jaylon said, it's got to be someone that's about winning. But, look, I think that I don't, not that I don't think every coach is about winning, but, some guys do go about it a little bit differently than others. So I think that the type of thing that Aaron Rodgers was talking about in there, and you're right, Aaron Rodgers is a very interesting guy, but when he's just talking ball, he's as good as it gets. And
yeah, agreed.
And
save me anything outside the football realm.
Yeah.
I will say I will watch the 3-part Netflix docuseries.
Oh, you are?
I find this guy to be a fascinating, compelling human being, and I'm just interested in going on that weird journey for a couple of days. But yes, I am most interested in how he views this game that we cover on a daily basis.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be watching that documentary, but hey, I understand if you want to. Anyway, so what Rodgers was saying there, the idea that you need to, and what you said, you need to find someone that is gonna know how to motivate Caleb properly. And I think that Caleb will respond really well to, and has in his life responded really well to, tough coaching. And so finding someone that's not going to baby him, if you will. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily what was happening under Shaden Waldron, but someone that's not going to BS him and is going to, demand perfection out of him, which sounds like what's happening for Aaron Rodgers. Someone was demanding perfection. Hey, if you didn't have 158.3 quarterback rating, you get a minus performance. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, I will say this because it is delicate, because I think there might be a perception out there that the Bears potentially leaned too far towards coddling Caleb Williams, when I think the intent was to try to keep their rookie quarterback in a strong headspace. And Caleb, by his own admission, is very hard on himself. And you've heard the word grace used with Caleb Williams more times in the last 7 months than I've ever heard it used at Haugh for the previous 11 seasons that I've been there. And so it's representative of a quarterback who can struggle a little bit, be really hard on himself. And so people are trying to make sure that he doesn't kill himself with his own self-critical nature, as driven as he is. And that's why the Thomas Brown message of the last 3 weeks of we are chasing excellence, we're not chasing perfection, really resonates, because I think there is that distinction that we've talked about. And with Caleb, I think it is like, it's a very fine line of trying to find the right ways to encourage him and push him, understanding that there are certain times where he gets a little bit frazzled and you need to put your arm around him and lift him back up. And there's other times where you need to be like, bro, that wasn't good enough, and we're not going to just walk past that. And so there's a lot to that. And that's why I think this hire is so complex and so high stakes.
And the last point, the idea of, the coach and GM having the full backing from the organization, like, I don't know. And look, we never know what the actual contract situations are of any of the front office people at most NFL teams, because they don't have to disclose those things. It doesn't affect the salary cap. I think it would be very helpful for the way that us in the media go about our jobs, but whatever. Anyway, my point is, if they want to get the best coach in here, they might have to consider Ryan Poles getting a contract extension to match up with that new coach. And I know that potentially means putting more money on the line, but the best coach available might want to be on the same timeline as his general manager. And that would also show the full backing of the organization. Like, hey, we trust you both to work together to get this done.
Don't forget, they did that with Ryan Pace when they went into the hiring process and landed on Matt Nagy. They wanted to marry those timelines up and assuage any concerns about the uncertainty that comes with having mismatched timelines. And so that is something that has to be considered. It's got to be talked through. You got to figure out who you're trying to align with. Again, Kevin Warren, I thought, said it very well on Monday, where he said you hate to overstate the importance of some of these decisions, but I think he said, like, this will set the trajectory of the franchise for the next 10 to 15 years, the decisions they make in the next 6 to 8 weeks. So buckle in and understand that this is pretty high stakes.
Yeah, it absolutely. And I don't think it's an understatement to say this is the most important hire that they're going to make this decade. So on to our last piece of sound here. Now, this piece of sound is going to be from Daniel Jeremiah. He was on the This Is Football podcast, and they were also talking about the Bears' next coaching hire. And the question was more so to do about who DJ has in mind for the next coach. And it ended up being very Caleb-centric. And so we'll play it out here and then we'll discuss it.
I think it's just stability and someone who gets him and doesn't. And honestly, I could give you 10 offensive coaches that would make sense. I think the biggest issue with Caleb has been, and it's not just being a defensive coach, but I think it was the messaging of the don't screw up style of play, of just beat it into them. Do not turn it over. Don't be reckless. Play on schedule. Be like, this is who you are. So we got him paralyzed in the pocket, taking sack after sack after sack, instead of just freeing him up and saying, hey, this is who you are. We want you to be that. We're going to live with some of the mistakes because the good's going to so far outweigh the bad. But don't be something you're not. That's who you are. Now it's on us to, put you in positions and with players and different situations to protect you from yourself, but do not alter your aggressiveness. I thought they kind of took his stinger away. And I think most offensive coaches, have the opposite philosophy in that regard.
I thought he was playing with hesitation. And I also think that it was the worst thing to happen to him, because he's the type of player, as you know, he makes things happen in the pocket. He steps up, he steps to his left. And I think he was trying to clock NFL speed the first month of the season, and he was playing hesitantly. So he didn't know, like, you'd see plays where he's playing a step slow and he's like, oh, I didn't know that they were this fast in the NFL, because you don't know. You cannot replicate NFL speed. So it all came out awkwardly in September and in October. And I felt like Shane Waldron and Matty Eberflus did nothing to get him playing confidently.
Yeah, I think it completely. To me, it was a combination of a lack of trust and an infusion of fear. It's not trusting these guys are going to be where they're supposed to be, and if it goes wrong, it's on me. It's my ultimate responsibility is do not make mistakes. So, I mean, and then even as an anticipation thrower, he can't throw with anticipation. I've seen him throw with anticipation, but it was just like, I don't know, is he really coming out of it right now? Like, I don't know. There's just not a lot of trust there. So I think that's all gotten better. It's all gotten better as we've gone throughout the year. And that's what's encouraging to me. So in terms of who's the ideal candidate, insert solid offensive minded coach. That's all I'm looking for.
Solid offensive minded.
I'm with Daniel Jeremiah on this. I don't want to take my chances with the defensive-minded coach who may subconsciously want to trust his side of the ball more than he wants to trust the quarterback. I think that's what happens so often with defensive-minded coaches. We've lived it here in Chicago, whether it's Lovie Smith, whether it's John Fox, whether it's Matt Eberflus. You see those moments where you just want the offense to not turn the ball over. The defense is going to keep you in a game, and then you try to win one when it's close. Daniel Jeremiah used two phrases in that soundbite that you played there that I starred here in my notebook. Took his stinger away and infusion of fear. That can't happen. That can't happen going forward with Caleb Williams. And I think what you've heard from Thomas Brown the last few weeks, and probably the reason that Caleb has looked better over the last 3 games, is that he is not afraid of making mistakes. He is not afraid of the failure. And without question, the most impressive thing to me that Caleb Williams has shown these last 3 weeks is the ability to play a poor first half. And this really goes back to Washington even 6 weeks ago, to play a poor first half and still be able to find it in the fourth quarter. That is rare. You remember the Jay Cutler experience. You knew after 2 drives whether Jay was going to play well or he was going to be sloppy all day. It was very rare that he found it within a game. Right? Caleb Williams has found it now within multiple games with high stakes in the fourth quarter. I had one source say to me earlier in the week that he just has a knack for pulling the nose of the plane up, and that's a great quality to have in a quarterback, and it instills belief in everyone around you. And so, look, like, I hope that the Bears land on an offensive-minded coach that can bring the best out of Caleb. You do those 2 things, and all of a sudden the direction of your franchise will be in a whole healthier place.
It's interesting because I don't disagree with a single thing you just said. My only, and this is a philosophical debate that we don't have to get too far into. Like, my feeling on head coaches, and it's not just for the Bears, it's throughout the entire league. Like, I don't give a damn if you come from offense or defense or special teams or position coach. It doesn't matter. To me, I just hire the best head coach. Hire the best coach, like, and that the best coach will understand all the things that you just said. And I understand that if it's a defensive coach, honestly, a guy that comes in here, it shouldn't matter if he's offensive or defensive focused. It should be someone that understands that both sides of the ball are equally important. And look, if it's a defensive guy and you're going to be running through offensive coordinators every 2-3 years because he's getting hired somewhere else, first of all, that's a good problem. Second of all, if you have a good head coach, he'll make another good hire. There's plenty of good offensive minds out there that can be found. And so that's my little aside on that. Don't get me wrong. I would love to see a guy like Ben Johnson come in here. I've gone ahead and dug into a few of his press conferences. I like the way that he talks, the way that he carries himself. Doesn't mean that we know if he'll be a good head coach or not, but I think that he's a guy that could win the press conference if they brought him in here. That's, we can get into candidates as we get down the line here, but that's my little soapbox thing there. But anyway, I agree with everything you said, and I agree with everything that Daniel Jeremiah said. And it has been really good to see that clearly Thomas Brown has gotten through to him and through to Caleb and said, hey, man, don't worry about making mistakes. Like, a couple of those balls he's thrown to Keenan Allen in the past couple of weeks have not been balls I think he's been willing to throw in the month prior. Like those tight window throws where it looks like it's going to get picked off and he somehow fits it in there because he's got the arm strength to do so. And that's the kind of thing that is made him special in college and can continue to make him special in the pros.
Yeah, well, just go back to the Detroit game on its own, and I'm sure you've seen me review these games on X with my emoji reviews of Caleb's reviews. There were more thumbs down plays in that Detroit game than I was comfortable with. He didn't play well, but you got into the second half, and things were going wayward for the offense, and he didn't wear the first half into the second half at all. And all of a sudden you're ripping touchdown passes to DJ, you're ripping a touchdown pass down the middle to Keenan, you're getting the offense in a flow, you've got the ball on your 1 yard line with the game on the line, and you're able to take your team down into field goal range and almost beyond. And so there is like just that definite it factor that Caleb brings to the table. I heard Cole Kmet on his podcast earlier in the week say that, they went out to Southern Cal last week for Caleb's jersey retirement ceremony at USC. And Caleb was talking about running the table. And if we win every game out, we're 9-8, and maybe we factor into the wild card race. And Cole was going, yeah, you know what? You're right. And so like that ability to infuse belief and hope in everyone around you because of the mindset you're in at all times is important. Just to your other point, I'm with you that you want to hire the best head coach. I would just hope that when you go through this process, that on tier 1 of your head coaching targets, you've got a guy that's offensive minded. You've got a guy that's defensive minded. You're weighing these out, and the tiebreaker goes to the guy who can connect best with your quarterback. I would hope that like those draft situations where people are like, why are you drafting the guy ranked 72nd when you could have drafted the guy that's ranked 68th? Well, the difference between them is so negligible that we're going to pick the guy that's 72nd because he fits a need for us. And so that's how I kind of view this with the head coaching situation as well. There's going to be enough candidates here to go through the process and say, here's our preferred choices. Just make sure you get one that makes sense for you. And that fit on so many levels is huge. And the absolute misfire on Matt Eberflus is something that I don't know that Ryan Poles will ever live down unless he finds a guy that takes the Bears to the playoffs 5 consecutive years here in this next search.
Right. And I agree. And I do agree. Look, all things being equal, pick the offensive minded guy and get Caleb the most comfortable that he can possibly be, because there's potential in there for superstardom still. Anyway, we will wrap things up here on this episode of Listen to This on the Take the North podcast. Dan, anything else before we get out of here and you fly to San Francisco?
No, I did take the liberty to pay a little extra money, just a little small out of my pocket. I upgraded to first class for the cross country flight to San Francisco. I'm excited about that. I've got some work to do on the plane, and I didn't want to do it crammed in, coach, up against a seat with the guy leaning back in front of me. So that's my footnote as we get out of here. I'll try to make the best of it as we go out west, and then we'll be back hopefully at some point with a victorious Bears podcast, which, as we mentioned on our last episode, we haven't done since I was sitting in London in a pub.
Yeah, we need it. I think we all need it. All right. Well, for Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune and for the injured, sick Mark Grody, who works for The Score, I'm Adam Studzinski. I produce the Take the North podcast. Download, listen, subscribe, tell a friend about us, and get as many of your Bears fans listening to us as possible. A lot of you already do, and we greatly appreciate it. We will, for real this time, talk to you after the game on Sunday.
Great talk. See you out there.